I am very pleased to introduce our next two guests. We have moved in our schedule. From the model of distance and hybrid learning programs to what I called seminary at home. It's not exactly correct because, as you'll hear, the Iona Initiative, now Iona Collaborative, of the Diocese of Texas and the Seminary of the Southwest has morphed a bit during its time, during the past several years. But it at least has this history. And the Bishop Kemper School, as you will find, is doing something quite unique and interesting. So we've moved then from a model that is based out of our old seminaries to one that grew out of diocesan schools, one of which is now partnering with the Iona Collaborative, with a number of dioceses and with the seminary is based at, and now as I understand it, in the Seminary of the Southwest in Austin, Texas, and the other with the Bishop Kemper School that is a partnership of a number of dioceses in the middle of the country. Dr. Don Compier is the Dean of the Bishop Kemper School for Ministry. He's been there since 2014. It's a joint project of the Diocese of Nebraska, Western Kansas, and Western Missouri, unless there are more now. He was previously the founding dean of the Community of Christ Seminary at Graceland University, which sought to become a leader in online education. And prior to this, he taught at CDSP, so he has extensive experience in distance and online forms of education. His PhD is from Emory. He studied there with Rebecca Chop and Jose Miguez Bonino. His dissertation, which became a book, was on John Calvin's rhetorical doctrine of sin. He also has a more recent book on listening to popular music, which Christian Century lifted up as one of their books of the year. He's a co-editor of volumes on theological education, theology of Scripture, and empire and the Christian tradition. Like Dr. Lewis here, his wide experience and the unique nature of the Kemper School, I thought, really made him a necessary choice to join the conversation of this conference. Dr. John Lewis is the Director of Formational Outreach, as well as lecturer in New Testament and Spirituality at Seminary of the Southwest in Austin, Texas. He directs the Iona Collaborative, formerly Initiative, an expanding program for local training of clergy in their diocesan settings, which began in the diocese as the Diocese of Texas's diocesan school, as I understand it, and now trains clergy in many dioceses, housed at the Seminary of the Southwest. His DPhil from Oxford is in New Testament, and he's the author of a book on theoethical reasoning in the letters of Paul. And when I looked, John, at all of the things that you're responsible for on your bio website, I have no idea how you made the time to be here, but I'm grateful that you are. And your wide experience in locally based clergy formation and Christian formation also made you a perfect choice for this gathering. I'm honored to welcome both of you, and John, you're first.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here with you today. I especially want to thank Bishop Howard and the Diocese of Florida and Canon Dupree, the Living Church, and Jordan for putting this all together. I've spent most of my 20 years in ministry helping people in congregations connect faith and daily life. And so this topic of bringing people to ordination through alternative approaches is something really I'm passionate about, and it's dear to my heart. Let me just say, to start out with, Seminary of the Southwest does still believe that residential seminary education is the norm. So let me just say that up front. So you might then say, well, why has the Seminary of the Southwest accepted this role of overseeing the Iona, what's now called the Iona Collaborative? And to answer that, I'd like to put it in the context of Paul's letter to the Philippians. In that letter, Paul writes to a congregation that he dearly loves, and he gives thanks for them that they have been partners with him in ministry from the beginning. And I heard a lot of your presentation about Swanee, talking about partnership with dioceses, and that's really at the heart of what we do in the Iona Collaborative. Also in the letter to Philippians, Paul really makes the sacrificial self-giving of Christ central to the gospel. And I see that playing out among many of the students that we have in the Iona Collaborative, the dioceses that are involved, and the seminary. And so I think what we've learned over the years, the practical wisdom of how to go about this process of training people for ordination, is a piece of the Iona Collaborative story. That said, let me just say that we're only scratching the surface in dealing with the issues, the challenges, and all the different parts of what's involved. And I've really enjoyed listening to the presentations last night and this morning, which really have already highlighted many of the tensions and challenges associated with this kind of education. When I talk about being partners in the gospel, let me just say a little bit about what I mean, and it's going to give you just a minute of history about the Iona Collaborative. In 2004, the Diocese of Texas formed its own school for local formation, and it was called the Iona School for Ministry. And the Diocese of Texas came to Seminary of the Southwest and asked a number of its faculty members to come to Camp Allen, often once a weekend, once a month weekends for 3 years. And so many of our faculty members really taught the core curriculum there of Bible, history, theology, and ethics, preaching, prayer book, liturgy, from the inception of the Iona School for Ministry. What happened in 2011 was that by then about 7 dioceses were sending students from different parts of the country to Camp Allen for an entire weekend, once a month for 3 years. And they went to the bishops in Texas and said, "This is getting expensive. Is there any way that you can take the curriculum and turn it into video presentations, PowerPoints, any number of different electronic media that you would then license to us as a curriculum that we could use in our local diocesan settings?" And the bishops in Texas decided that sounded like a good idea for the well-being of the whole church, as an idea that had really come from the grassroots of dioceses involved in the school at that point. So a number of our Southwest faculty members did that. I mean, I can still remember the press over a period of months to get all of these course materials turned into videos and teaching presentations. In fact, it's still burned into my memory because it was a fast track to get that material together and the school off the ground. And what's happened, we first launched that program in 2012. As Jordan said, it was called the Iona Initiative. It was an initiative throughout the church to bring teaching to the local diocesan level. At the time, there were 7 originating dioceses. We have now, this is 2018, we're now up to 24 dioceses participating in a variety of different ways, including 5 dioceses in the Bishop's Native Collaborative. I think some of you're going to hear from them later on today. And so we've put together this pretty expansive curriculum, not only the canonical areas of examination, but the curriculum also includes all sorts of spirituality materials. It involves cultural sensitivity training. There's 250 different options that you can choose from. And the seminary faculty has not done all of those. They've simply done what I'm going to call the core curriculum, the canonical areas. I think I left out preaching a minute ago, but we contribute in the preaching area too. But What we do is we collaborate. Our task as the seminary is to hear from the diocese what they think they need. And then our task is to try and sort out how can we respond with the resources at the seminary. And I should say, the seminary only took over the leadership of the program in 2017. So we're new to this. But what we've begun to do is already listen to the diocese, and we've begun to implement some changes already. First of all, what we learned early on is that many dioceses do not have the capacity to have their students take CPE or do any kind of experiential ministry and reflection on that ministry. So in the past year, we've now hired an ACPE certified educator, the Reverend Sarah Noel Sweeney, and she's already begun to work with our Iona diocese that would like that to do distance CPE. Now, what that means is she goes and starts a cohort in the diocesan location. She then convenes the cohort once a week for 2.5 hours, and then at the end of the time, she'll go back and wrap up the CPE training. But many people in the bivocational ministry training track, many people don't have time to do certified CPE, which requires 400 hours. So what we've done is we now offer 300-hour, 200-hour, 100-hour training programs that she does both in person and by video conferencing. And it's just getting off the ground. As we speak, she's in the Diocese of Hawaii, kicking off a 6-person cohort for the Diocese of Hawaii. I really appreciated what Bishop Sumner said last night, that every pastoral question is a theological question. And so what we're trying to do in this part of the addition we're making to the Iona Collaborative Program is to really help students process their ministry work and understand that every pastoral question is a theological question. And I would say most of our dioceses don't have the opportunity to do certified CPE in their own local setting. I think Bishop Kemper School is probably an exception to that, but many of our dioceses have students from rural settings, and some states don't even have accredited CPE centers. Seminary of the Southwest has now become an accredited CPE center, so we're really thinking that this piece is going to make a really important addition to our curriculum. We also have dioceses asking us for help in evaluating the progress of their students in formation. And I think they're asking the deeper question that we heard about last night, and that is that maybe 90% of theological education is formation of the person, not knowledge and information. And so what we've been working on at the seminary is creating a response to this diocesan need in a variety of ways. First of all, we are in the process of redoing many of our video teachings to be short 5 to 10 minute videos with some really significant discussion questions for the students and the mentors in their local diocese to engage. So rather than having to sit and watch 30 or 45 minutes of video, we're creating much more space for that formation, for that conversation that Bishop Alexander was talking about last night, those conversations that really make a difference in the way people are formed. We're also looking at ways to help dioceses evaluate the progress of students by using some criteria and you might say some competency-based categories that the Anglican Communion has actually promoted. And so we're working to take those areas and help the diocese understand how to evaluate a student's progress based on those criteria. So again, it's less about information and knowledge testing and more about how are they being formed for ministry in a variety of categories. We also have heard from the diocese we'd like some more help and some more significant preaching resources. So we're in a conversation now with the Episcopal Preaching Foundation and with Backstory Preaching about ways that we can supplement the curriculum that we have already in preaching. And so I'm hoping by the time our deans of the schools meet in July that we'll have something concrete to talk to them about if they're interested in sharing. Another thing we heard from them was, we don't like your Moodle learning management system. Do something different. And so, and believe me, I get it. It's a cumbersome thing to work with. So we're in the process, and we'll have this resolved here shortly, but we're going to actually take all of our teaching materials and put them in a Google Drive that's accessible by the diocese who have licensed the use of our material. Let me just, in the interest of time, I'm going to just talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we've discovered in the last year of overseeing this project, and in the hopes of stimulating some conversation from you all. First of all, this is in no order of importance, but let me just say that the selection of students by diocese to participate in a local clergy formation program is about as diverse as you can possibly imagine. And I think one of you earlier this morning in your session said, from people who don't have college degrees to PhDs. And I would say that's a big challenge, because as the seminary is trying to offer materials that can be used by people from across a wide spectrum of backgrounds, it's a challenge. And what I'm really trying to get us to look at is, how can we come up with materials that are actually going to be able to serve different levels rather than just one homogenized approach? Is there a way to create some introductory or some parallel curriculum for people at different levels of education? But as you can imagine, it's a daunting task. The other thing I would say about student selection, I think it's really important to second what I heard last night, how important it is for dioceses to be proactive in identifying the folks that might be suited to do local clergy education and formation. We often default to that model of self-selection. I think I'm called. But in my home diocese, West Texas, we're actually experimenting. This year, we've called 6 people into the local clergy formation program that we've started with Iona Collaborative. And we've gone to congregations and picked people that have significant employment and significant leadership skills already, and talk to them about being called to ministry in their local settings. And so I can't wait to see how that progresses over the course of these next several years. Second challenge that's already been identified several times, but we're beginning to see how in our curriculum we need to make more space for those deeper conversations that are so crucial to formation for ministry. I first encountered this as a New Testament teacher in the Iona School for Ministry in Texas, where it is from Friday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon until Sunday about 1 o'clock. It's intense, and there's no time for conversation hardly at all. So when those people would come to West Texas, and we had some students in that school, our examining chaplains, which I oversee, really began to hear from the Iona students we never get to process like we are doing here in our examining chaplains retreat. We have an annual retreat of seminarians. Made it really clear to me that we've got to fix that to create more space for that conversation. It's obviously where people get formed in being able to converse with people of different perspectives, but also just, we heard great descriptions of it last night. This is just where this meaningful theological discussion happens. Another challenge is slightly different from one I've already named, but it's the multicultural dimension of trying to serve 24 or more dioceses. We have cultural issues in the Diocese of Los Angeles, for instance. They are a member of the collaborative, and we're working with them. They are engaged in the process of translating some of our material into Chinese and Korean for congregations for whom those are their first language. We also have the Diocese of Olympia, which is beginning to incorporate a variety of people with backgrounds, including some for whom English is not their first language. So how do we create a curriculum that's accessible to them and sensitive to their particular needs? We're trying to at least engage the question. And finally, the same is true in the Bishop's Native Collaborative. We've been, I think, deficient in presenting sort of a mainstream approach to theological education without paying much attention to their context at all. So it's my hope that over the course of time we'll be able to sort out how best to deal with that in the ways that we deliver the curriculum. Another challenging aspect, I think, for local clergy formation is the recognition that this really needs to be a lifelong educational process. I mean, that's true for clergy too, so but I'm only addressing the local formation piece. Most of the students that I know from the Iona Collaborative, they understand we have a lifetime process in front of us to continue learning. Actually, in some ways, they know that at a deeper level, I think, than some seminary graduated clergy. But how to deliver that lifelong education is something we're working on. Right now, as a part of what a diocese gets when they sign on to license our curriculum, is once a year, we, if they ask us, we will send a faculty member to either teach an Iona weekend or do a clergy day for the diocese or do a consultation with them, but we offer one of our faculty members to each participant. Some choose to take advantage of that, some don't. But I think it's at least one way we can begin to establish face-to-face presence in the diocese to do continuing education work. Another challenge that's been identified already, and that is, the discussion started last night, how do we form entire congregations? I think that the comment was made that total ministry fails if we don't educate an entire congregation to what that's about. So how do we do that work? The seminary is really looking at how can we provide some lay formation materials to congregations as part, whether it's part of the Iona Collaborative or even separate from that. We're really looking hard at that because there are many congregations across the country that don't really have easy access to good teaching materials. And so we're working hard to respond to that need. Finally, in a challenge that I have in sort of creating what I'm calling a 2.0 version of our curriculum is to bring on board the seminary's faculty members in many of the areas of spirituality and practical ministry that right now the curriculum has folks from all over the Diocese of Texas presenting that material. And some of the feedbacks we've gotten from the diocese is that, well, to put it bluntly, one said, you just need to start over with that. And so what we're doing is beginning to do new video presentations of our faculty members in the areas, these spirituality areas that I'm referring to. Those are a few challenges. I'm sure there are more, and hopefully you'll invite us to engage what you think are challenges when we have time to talk. So thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm also very honored to have been invited to be part of this great conversation, and it's great to share this session with Dr. Lewis. And we have a lot to talk about, and enjoying that very much. This is my 26th consecutive year as a full-time theological educator, hard to believe. And for 22 of those years, I was in the world of accredited seminary education, Higher Learning Commission and its regional affiliates, Association of Theological Schools. And so I can certainly make a very passionate case, as has already been done here, for the importance and the uniqueness of what we call residential seminary education. I think what I've learned the last few years is a very Anglican lesson, I may say, which is that it's both and. It's not either or. We need to have seminaries that are residential continue to do the great work they're doing and to continue to grow in that, and we need schools like Bishop Kemper School for Ministry. I have a fact sheet that I brought with me that I can share later that gives you sort of all the data about how long we've been around and how many faculty we have and how many students and all that sort of stuff. I just noticed one glaring error. We were not founded in 2014. We were founded in 2013. So please correct that. I can hear Calvin saying, no excuse in the back of my head, you know. But I want to talk what I've been learning more generally, I think, about the enterprise of local formation. And I want to, first of all, kind of question the terminology that we use. When I was at the Church Divinity School of the Pacific for 9 very happy years, most of the students there were not in residence. They were commuters. So I think that we need to be a little cautious with that terminology of residential in many cases. Secondly, as a very contextual theologian who has always tried to take the historical disciplines very seriously, I would like to know what formation is not local. You see what I'm saying? There are different locales, but they're all local. The Catholicity University of the Church comes from sharing across locales. Okay, so I am going to use very reluctantly the terminology of accredited and not accredited. And my reluctance is here. I think it's a shame that schools like mine are not accredited, because accreditation means accountability. It means knowing that you need outside eyes and ears to take a look at your program so that you can improve and get a better sense of your strengths and your weaknesses. And so we need to figure out some way for schools like Bishop Kemper to have appropriate accreditation standards and procedures. But for now, it's, I think, accurate to talk about accredited and non-accredited. I think that the reason that Bishop Kemper School came into being is typical of many situations, and so I'm going to just tell a little bit of why we did what we did, focusing on the diocese where I am canonically resident, which is Kansas. But what I say about Kansas, I know to be true of West Missouri and Nebraska as well, and Western Kansas has far fewer parishes and far fewer full-time priests than the other 3 partners do. In the Diocese of Kansas, we have 44 parishes. Only half of those parishes have a full-time person, and in a few cases, that full-time person is shared by 2 of those parishes. We only have 3 fully stipendiary assistants in the entire diocese. 1 in the Wichita area and 2 in the Kansas City area. Not at the cathedral in Topeka. We don't have any full-time assistants at our cathedral. And that number is going to go down if present trends continue. Because when clergy retire, as will happen pretty soon at St. Paul's Leavenworth, for instance, the congregation is going to realize they really don't have the money that they need to keep a full-time person going for very long. We are a net exporter of clergy. We send people to seminaries all the time, and I encourage people to do that. There are people that come to BKSM who are young, who are bright, who have a long career ahead of them, and I tell them, don't come to my school. You need to consider other schools. And so we have people at General, we have people coming at Sewanee, at Virginia, and so forth. But they tend not to come back. Stacy's from the Diocese of West Missouri, right? Sarah Noel Sweeney is from the Diocese of Kansas. And we're happy to share these people with the General Church. We really are. The people of Kansas are generous. The people of Missouri are generous. The people of Nebraska are generous. But it doesn't help us in terms of our situation and the strength of our mission. Even when we have full-time positions, very interesting statistic, last fall, in all of Province 5, 6, and 7, you know, the center swath of the United States from Canada and Mexico, there were 63 full-time positions, and they only got 20 qualified applicants for those positions. We are the flyover area, folks. We're the people about whom they say, what's wrong with Kansas, right? Even if we have people who feel called to come to this strange mission field in the middle of the country, their spouse may not be able to find a suitable position. Their children's education may be involved. And so we simply don't have enough clergy full-time to do the kind of work that we want to do. So what are we to do? Some people say, well, just close congregations. If they can't sustain a full-time person, they don't deserve to be around. That really hacks me off. I have been in those places, Independence, Kansas, and Lexington, Missouri, and so forth. And sometimes you have beautiful historical properties. Lexington was founded by Bishop Kemper himself, you know, Jackson Kemper. But more than that, these are communities where there's great missional need because they've been left behind by everybody else already. They've been left behind by the educational systems. They've been left behind by industry. They've been left behind by state services. And it seems to me entirely contrary to a church that stresses incarnation to say, we're going to leave you behind too. Fend for yourself. And these are people that are not close enough to another church that they can drive over and have Eucharist. Morning prayer is wonderful, and a lot of those places get very good at it. But you need sacraments. Don't we believe that? And so we have to find a way to make it work, to make Christ's mission go forward. I see us as missionaries. I see us, I'm so glad that they decided to name our school after Bishop Jackson Kemper, you know, the bishop of the great outdoors. Like myself, a Dutch American with strong roots in New Amsterdam, but who felt that call to go out into the prairies when there was nothing. No parishes, no dioceses, no schools. And you know what he did across the whole central swath of the country. I've been to his grave at Nashotah. Wonderful to do that. Another way to put it is that we're in the tent-making phase of Paul's ministry. In other words, I'm not saying that we want to be this way forever. On the contrary. What we're doing is to build the church back up again so that we can have more full-time people and send more people to the residential seminaries. This is a temporary expedient, not an end result that we're looking for. You know, a friend of mine gave me a prayer card with the cross of San Damiano. You know the story there, right? St. Francis went there, the church was in ruins, and he heard the Holy Spirit say, rebuild my church. And I carry that card. I don't have it with me now. I forgot it at home, but I carry it around with me and think about that a lot. That what we're trying to do is to build and rebuild the church. And I believe in that process there are some, not most, not all, but some who are genuinely called not just a diaconal ministry, not just a lay ministry, but to bivocational priestly ministry. And the choice is not, in our area, between bivocational and full-time. The choice is bivocational or nothing. That's the choice. Believe me, I've looked at the diocesan budgets in our area. I've looked at the parish budgets. The money ain't there. And so the question is, are we going to have any priestly ministry at all in many situations? And if you are going to have bivocational people working in a mission context, they need a team behind them. They need strong deacons who understand that the deacon's primary call is outreach ministry. They need lay people who are equipped and trained and empowered. You know, we have 7 canonical licensed lay areas. And all of us know a lay Eucharistic minister or many lay Eucharistic ministers. All of us know lay Eucharistic visitors. But how many of us really know very many lay preachers, lay catechists, lay pastoral administrators? And the one that I really have never encountered is lay evangelist. Any of you know a lay evangelist? Oh, good. I want to hear about this. I've never found one yet. Okay. See, our whole vision is guided by 1 Corinthians 12. I loved your reference to Philippians. We put this on the wall at our new facility that opened last August. We have a quote from 1 Corinthians 12 on the wall. We want to remind ourselves constantly. We believe that the Spirit has given gifts of ministry to every member of the church. And they're different, but they're equally important. There are different orders, but there's no ranking of those orders. And we want to make sure that all of the gifts of God's people are deployed fully, equipped, supported, so that the church can grow again and reach so many who desperately need to hear the good news. And this relates, by the way, to faculty as well. There are so many people who went in good faith to get their PhD, feeling called to help the church in the task of seminaries. But there are far more qualified people than there are positions, especially in today's very difficult job market. And so we have excellent people teaching at state colleges or small religious schools or in the parish, and they too need to have their gifts recognized and deployed. So I am so happy with our faculty of 29 plus. It kind of fluctuates all the time, of which half are PhDs, and several are published well-known authors. And in our core areas, liturgy, history, it's all PhDs. And they're outstanding people. And so you see, Lisa Campbell at Virginia put this very well in a recent conversation that we were both part of. We can look at a scarcity model and say, well, we just have to do this because it's where we are. And there's some truth to that. But we can see also opportunity. We can see call to do some things we should have been doing all along anyway, and that now we're being forced to do. And let me just talk about some of the values that I hold very dear that have really come to the fore in my work at Bishop Kemper in ways that have made it such a satisfying job for me. First of all, we just have to be collaborative. We have to engage in partnership. The fact that our 4 dioceses came together the way they did was an instance of that. But it's also ecumenical. We are working with the Central State Synod of the ELCA. And what was most surprising to us was the open-handed generosity of Nazarene Theological Seminary in Kansas City that wanted to be our partner in providing library resources and accepting our courses for transfer credit, etc. And we are just open to any and all such conversations. We're going to talk about preaching, because that really caught my attention when you mentioned that. We also are able to give equal time to the diaconate, to various lay roles, and we're able to do it in ways that are affordable and accessible. And those are, I think, great values. We are able to be flexible, to be nimble, to be constantly adaptive. You know, something doesn't work, it gets dropped, and we go on to something else. You know, we're not stuck in channels that make turning the ship more difficult. Dr. Lewis talked about continuing education, and there's been great research done by David Gortner at Virginia that shows the gaps that are there when people come out of a 3-year seminary. And I think I really agree with Bishop Alexander. That's fine. We need to stress other things at seminary, and yet somehow those gaps do have to be filled. And this is, as you said, even more the case for people coming out of local formation. And so we need to develop really a very comprehensive and intentional approach to continuing education. I'm just going to critique our dear church here for a moment, okay? Basically, our canons say, "Thou shalt do continuing education." Stop. That would not be okay in nursing. It would not be okay in law. And isn't the cure of souls at least as important as those things? So it's time for us to step up the game and develop, serious, lifelong continuing education. We have to have it if our bivocational ministers are going to be successful. Another thing that has really struck me at Bishop Kemper School is that adult seminary education is about co-learning. When you have a person in class who's one of the leading experts on rural health in America, frequently on NPR, when you have a person who got his PhD at Harvard as one of the major experts in Korean religious history, when you have this person who has been the lawyer for the Kansas City Chiefs in your class, people, I could just go on and on, people who have run businesses for years, who have kept the church going as lay people for many, many years, you want to make sure that whatever you do engages their wisdom as well, not just that of the professor. Because I figured out a long time ago that actually students at seminary always learn more from each other than they do from the professor. And that's always been just fine with me. Lastly, let me just sketch the vision that guides everything I do. I'm half Dutch. I went to Dutch public schools. My father's from Rotterdam. My wife is from Mexico City. We'll be married 38 years tomorrow. I'm in big trouble for being here and not there. Right? And we have this kind of insider-outsider look at American culture, Let's be honest, we're extremely competitive people. And that bleeds over into the church all the time in unconscious ways that are not helpful and not gospel, okay? I see a growing era of the term has been used several times, an ecology, an ecosystem of theological education, something like a master plan for theological education in the Episcopal Church, where we assess all the resources that are out all around, and especially with the distance technologies we have now, get our best team on the field whenever possible, so that we move towards being one seminary of Christ's one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church in different parts. Another way to think about 1 Corinthians 12. I think a conference like this does a lot to move us towards that kind of a conversation. And that's what keeps me going when I have to do the W-2 forms for the seminary and the 1099s. And we were talking about this, right? All the things that we never were trained to do that now we figure out that we have to do. That's what it's all about for me, the service of Christ's church to the best of our ability, pooling all of our gifts to have a growing church. Thank you.